evening, everyone. My name is Karen Cole, and I'm the co-chair of the Social Justice Committee at the Unitarian Universalist Church of St. Petersburg, and I want to wish you a warm welcome. I'm glad you could come, and I'm glad, most importantly, that you're interested in this topic because there is so much misinformation out there. Just a little bit of housekeeping. There are restrooms right around the corner here. Okay, that's the closest, and since there isn't a huge crowd, we could probably just use that one. At this time now, I'd like to turn this over to Henry Raines, okay, who is the administrator for Onward and Empowered.
Hi everyone, as Karen just said, I'm Henry Raines, and this is being presented by Onward and Empowered of Florida Incorporated. It's a 501c nonprofit that was just recently formed in July to be educational on public affairs and civic engagement. And I also want to thank everyone that's here joining us in person, but I also want to thank everyone on the live stream that's watching right now. And of course, we've got to thank the people that really help us make this happen. And first of all, of course, the Unitarian Universalist Church of St. Petersburg, Reverend Ben, Karen from the Social Justice Committee. Way up out of sight is Sophie, who is making this available to the rest of the world around the globe here, and her mom Erin for giving her a ride here tonight, all the other volunteers here. And what we're here to talk about is, it's in the distant memory for some of us weren't even alive. Well, actually I think everybody here was alive except maybe Sophie, but, or maybe one other person. Anyway, November 6th will be the 39th anniversary of the last real immigration reform that the United States of America had. And it was a bipartisan effort under the presidency of Ronald Reagan. And even people that were alive then that may not realize how different the times are from, some of us do, I'm sure, some of us are aware of that, but I'm not going to play it today, but there is a clip of George Bush and Ronald Reagan debating immigration reform and the primary for the presidential election of 1980, and you would think they were to the left of a lot of the Democrats in the United States today. Now, 501c3, Onward and Empowered Florida, we're not partisan, we're not advocating any party, but we are making note and educating about the difference in 40 years have made. So before we get to our speakers, we're going to just hear a short clip. This is the last speech that Ronald Reagan made. It would have been 1988, so 2 years after the immigration reform. And we're going to hear what that was. We'll hear from speakers, and then maybe leave you with some hope about what might be coming around the corner. Let me go ahead and start this, and I'll be right back up here when he finishes.
Since this is the last speech that I will give as president, I think it's fitting to leave one final thought, an observation about a country which I love. It was stated best in a letter I received not long ago. A man wrote me and said, "You can go to live in France, but you cannot become a Frenchman. You can go to live in Germany or Turkey or Japan, but you cannot become a German, a Turk, or Japanese. But anyone from any corner of the earth can come to live in America and become an American." Yes, the torch of Lady Liberty symbolizes our freedom and represents our heritage, the compact with our parents, our grandparents, and our ancestors. It is that lady who gives us our great and special place in the world. For it's the great life force of each generation of new Americans that guarantees that America's triumph shall continue unsurpassed into the next century and beyond. Other countries may seek to compete with us, but in one vital area, as a beacon of freedom and opportunity that draws the people of the world, no country on earth comes close. This, I believe, is one of the most important sources of America's greatness. We lead the world because unique among nations, we draw our people, our strength, from every country and every corner of the world. And by doing so, we continuously renew and enrich our nation. While other countries cling to the stale past, here in America, we breathe life into dreams, we create the future, and the world follows us into tomorrow. Thanks to each wave of new arrivals to this land of opportunity, we're a nation forever young, forever bursting with energy and new ideas, and always on the cutting edge, always leading the world to the next frontier. This quality is vital to our future as a nation. If we ever closed the door to new Americans, our leadership in the world would soon be lost. A number of years ago, an American student traveling in Europe took an East German ship across the Baltic Sea. One of the ship's crew members from East Germany, a man in his 60s, struck up a conversation with the American student. After a while, the student asked the man how he had learned such good English, and the man explained that he had once lived in America. He said that for over a year he'd worked as a farmer in Oklahoma and California, that he'd planted tomatoes and picked ripe melons. It was, the man said, the happiest time of his life. Well, the student, who'd seen the awful conditions behind the Iron Curtain, blurted out the question, well, why did you ever leave? I had to, he said. The war ended. The man had been in America as a German prisoner of war. Now, I don't tell this story to make the case for former POWs. Instead, I tell this story just to remind you of the magical, intoxicating power of America. We may sometimes forget it, but others do not. Even a man from a country at war with the United States, while held here as a prisoner, could fall in love with us. Those who become American citizens love this country even more. And that's why the Statue of Liberty lifts her lamp to welcome them to the Golden Door. It is bold men and women yearning for freedom and opportunity who leave their homelands and come to a new country to start their lives over. They believe in the American dream, and over they make it come true for themselves, for their children, and for others. They give more than they receive, they labor and succeed, and often they are entrepreneurs. But their greatest contribution is more than economic, because they understand in a special way how glorious it is to be an American. They renew our pride and gratitude in the United States of America, the greatest, freest nation in the world, the last best hope of man on earth.
Well, I think you can see the difference right there. Onward and Empowered of Florida wants to look forward, not just back at Ronald Reagan. We're looking forward to the idea that we can still have immigration reform in this country, and our speakers will let you know how that could come about. I have more to talk about between speakers about how maybe you can get involved with Onward and Empowered in Florida or support the different speakers. But first of all, let me get started with our first speaker. Kelly Kirschner is the former mayor of the city of Sarasota, and he's one of the co-founders of Unidos Now. He is also the chair of the organization currently. He has a master's in Latin American Studies from Georgetown University. He lived and worked in Central and South America for over 4 years. He speaks Spanish fluently, but he is also knowledgeable about the history and challenges of the immigrant population face here in the United States. And there will be just a quick, you can get involved with an Onward and Empowered in Florida. Out there is a QR code on a stand, and it has a couple of different purposes. If you'd like to help us do more of these events around the state, we've held them in Hillsborough County, Manatee County. The speakers you're seeing tonight have spoken in Sarasota County also. And there's a way that if you click on the QR code, scan it, take it home and look at it if you want, and you'll see how you can help us out there. Also, if you go on the Onward and Empowered FL.org, that you'll see behind the PowerPoint, it'll be back up on the screen. There is a contact place there that you can click on, and you can also send us your information. We'll keep you up to date on the events that we're doing comes out. You may even get some special notes from some of our speakers. And of course, that goes for everybody that's listening online, wherever you are, that would like to hear from you too. And I think that I know that Sophie, who's running that up there, has told me that on Sundays they get comments. So if you're out there watching, please let us know how we're doing in the comment section there. And now let's hear from Kelly Kirschner.
Good evening. This will be our first that I've never followed Ronald Reagan speaking. So that's fun, Henry. We're doing some work with mediums. So yeah, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in rural northern Guatemala from 1999 to 2003, and then worked on a USAID project for close to another year after that, in an area that really had zero migration from that area of Guatemala to the U.S. And then literally in the past, it's obviously slowed now, but in the past 8 years, that whole area, the shift in really significant moves in migration has started to take place, which is fascinating and sad in many ways, and a number of reasons that we won't be able to talk about today. But it's something that I guess I've been living for 25 years, and started a number of nonprofit organizations there in Guatemala, and also started with CJ, a nonprofit in Sarasota and Manatee counties, called Unidos Now, that really works to integrate the immigrant population of Sarasota and Manatee counties into the full fabric of the community. And so that really informs, I think, this conversation that we're going to have tonight. We founded Unidos Now in 2010, and I think really the backdrop of why we even did that was very similar, unfortunately, to maybe why Henry and others have founded this nonprofit tonight, and that was because there was a gubernatorial election in the state of Florida, and it was during the height of the recession, and the biggest culprit that one candidate fingered as being responsible for high unemployment in the state of Florida was the immigrant. And his campaign was about $15 million of TV and radio ads that said he would bring a law similar to what the state of Arizona had done, which says that because she looks like she could be an immigrant and she has an accent, it doesn't matter that I have any other probable cause. I can ask as a law enforcement officer for her to show documentation that she is a legal resident of this country. If she doesn't possess that, I am able to basically imprison her until her loved ones can show us that proof. If after a period of 48 hours she doesn't have that, we can send her to a detention center for ultimate process of deportation. And that governor, who went on to defeat a front runner that everybody thought was going to run away with it, he won, and I think really that provided a playbook for what we've been living for the past 15 years, unfortunately, and what continues to go on, which is so dramatically different than what we saw with Ronald Reagan. So I'm going to go through the presentation. These are my two children. My daughter wearing her Mayan skirt and huipil blouse, and her brother hanging out in the garden, but I think everything we do is ultimately for our children, so I always like to start off with that. And then in the UU and other places of faith, but frankly, when so much of our political rhetoric right now is grounded in really Judeo-Christian conversation and somehow this great cognitive dissonance that we have politically, it's always good to remember where it began in the book of Exodus and what was said about not mistreating the immigrant, because remember that you too were an immigrant in the land of Egypt once. And so to that point on wrapping these conversations related to some of the really draconian and things that now even worse than what we saw just 2.5 years ago with our governor here, with kids being zip tied, they're 6 years old, and put into vans with masked ICE agents. But there's a quote here, if you can read it, where DeSantis says, "We are wrapping ourselves in the armor of God to really round up and deport these individuals." And this was the infamous use of state of Florida resources to put individuals on planes and fly them up to places like Martha's Vineyard. I was mayor of Sarasota, as Henry said, and I think one of the reasons that I joined with CJ when we talk about immigrant integration, we were seeing these pieces of first-gen immigrants, particularly the children of immigrants, and not integrating into the community. And that's what animated me while I was still an elected official. Beyond just speaking truth to the lie of this great lie about our immigrant population, there were also key pieces that you see in a community on why the work needs to be done to integrate this segment into the population. I think from a civic integration standpoint, in 2010, when I was still in office, we had a census, and our Hispanic community surpassed the size of our African American community for the first time in history. And yet, while they were 20% of the population, it only represented 2% of registered voters, and of those 2% of Latino voters, only about 33% were showing up to vote. And so you can't have a segment of a population that is that big that is completely on the sidelines. And when you do, then you see other vignettes of the gang type of activity and integration. And so that's really the work of what we have been doing for the past 15 years in that area with Unidos Now. This was a large gathering early on in 2011-12 when they still thought that they would bring that type of a law to Florida. Standing room only crowd in Sarasota attending a Conozca tus Derechos event, which is a Know Your Rights event, that if you are stopped by police, what rights do you have regardless of your immigration status? And so there's this wonderful quote that I always love from Mark Twain that I think is so apt for all of us as Americans, and that's really what my portion of the conversation today is about getting to what Twain says, it's what you know for sure that just ain't so. I think that exists with way too many folks in this country. And so what I want to do in my brief period of time is really address a lot of these myths that are constantly rolled out and constantly talked about, and maybe share more information with all of you that you may or may not know, but more importantly, hopefully, that you can extend to your networks once you leave here or once you log off for those that are with us online. The Latinx community, nothing homogenous, and I'm having a tough time reading that, so I'm going to move this. Can everyone read that screen? Yeah. And I'm not going to read through all of these things, but I think the key takeaway from here is, but for our Hispanic population really over the past 20 years, this country would look a lot like Europe, that if you look at European birth rates and the types of things that countries in Europe are doing to try to bring back Italy and Spain, if you can prove 25% one grandparent was a Spanish citizen or an Italian citizen, you become a Spanish citizen immediately. They're doing all these types of things to try to recognize a really aging country and all of the economic issues that faces. But for our Latino community, that is both immigration and birth, we would be in the same boat. So these are our friends from Mayberry. I love this church. Karen, thanks so much for hosting us here. That I heard 1926 was this built. Really incredibly beautiful facility, and I know St. Pete has its own history, good, bad, and ugly as it relates to its time here. And I think one of the things that we're grappling with, and it's interesting, again, starting with Reagan, Reagan was the first one that used Make America Great Again. So it's interesting that our current movement has co-opted that, but they didn't co-opt the whole messaging of it. But I think there is this illusion of MAGA that is, something of Mayberry. And the fact of the matter is Mayberry left long ago, and I don't know if Mayberry ever existed. Maybe there were towns like Mayberry, but the fact of the matter is that it really didn't exist. Our first Latinos here in the state of Florida would be in St. Augustine, and actually if you want to go back even further than that, Cabeza de Vaca landed here in Pinellas County, I think in 1520, and had an established community in what is today Palm Harbor, and then led the first transcontinental exploration that ended in California long before Lewis and Clark. And so that Spanish language Latin presence has been here from the very beginning. As you can also remember, the people in the entire west of Arizona, California, Colorado that was always Mexican territory, and overnight they became U.S. citizens. And as many people say, they didn't cross the border crossed them. And then if you think about over time, we've had the Bracero program, Operation Bootstrap. We can talk a lot about Cuba and Operation Peter Pan, the Mariel Boat Lift, the Balseros, all of these types of things that the U.S. has participated, welcomed in some shape or fashion, and all of this has also led to this really significant growth in our Latin community. And then there's also this fallacy that somehow that Mayberry is no longer here because the doors of the border were just open and we had lawlessness at the border, and this massive influx of Latinos in this country is due to that. But the fact of the matter is that since the beginning of the 2000s, births by Hispanic families have outnumbered immigration from all of Central and South America. And whether or not you like our Constitution does have birthright citizenship. So the train has left the station. Mayberry is no longer Mayberry. We are this very multicultural country, and we are increasingly very much an Hispanic country. This is a student of Unidos Now that I think I always like to use. She is I believe a senior, has recently graduated from Barnard College, that's part of Columbia, and we're proud of the types of things that we do and work with students like this. But if you isolated the photo of this young lady, you wouldn't know, is she from India, is she from the Caribbean, is she from Latin America? And so Latin America and being Hispanic is not monolithic. If you can travel, if those of you who have traveled, you can understand there's Afro-Latin populations, there are Lebanese populations that have lived for multiple generations in Latin America and now are here. And so I think that's also a myth that we should dispel as well. And also important coming out of Hispanic Heritage Month as well. A red herring is not just a fish, but also something that's intended to be misleading or distracting, and I think ultimately we could probably talk about all of this stuff. Again, if you go back to the gubernatorial election in 2010, I think if we honestly think about it, it's all an unfortunate charade. It's a smoke screen. It's kind of like a culture war that at the end of the day, it is not one of the major issues that threatens this country. It is not driving crime. It is not driving unemployment. If anything, every indicator suggests that it's actually helping the fiscal situation that I'll talk about of this government. It's helping the growth of our economy. And so really all it is getting back to that Mark Twain thing of this visceral reaction and othering of people that unfortunately politicians, not just in the United States, but have been doing since the beginning of time, and that's unfortunate. The Washington Post ran a series of articles during Trump's first term in 2019, going back, interviewing immigrants from throughout Central America that had participated in building and running a number of his properties, particularly his golf courses. So the first myth is that, as I talked about earlier, that we're being overrun by those from south of the border. If we go back as far as 2011, We saw then, and there's an institute at Princeton University, that for the first time in 60 years, in 2011, net traffic has gone to zero and is probably a little bit negative. And actually, then to update you, if you look at where Mexico is, that I think a lot of times, and we hear a lot of rhetoric about the Mexican border and the barbarians are at the gate. The fact of the matter is, it hasn't really been an issue since 2010. It has gone down with a slight increase in 23, but from a high of 6.9 million unauthorized, now it's down by more than 2 million in over the past 15 years. And you might ask, well, why is that? One, the Mexican economy has been doing very well. And number two, the Mexican birth rate has dropped from basically the 1960s of being above 4 to 5 children per woman to now it's a little bit above 2 and very close to what the U.S. is. So the irony of this is we don't even have, historically the U.S. post-slavery used our border as a spigot. When we needed labor, we could just let it in. And by the way, you will never hear a conversation in this state or this country that we should ever go after these large employers, the pork farmers, the poultry farmers, all of these developers that built this amazing, downtown over the past 20 years. And I guarantee if you had gone to any subcontractor and if you heard any other language besides Spanish, you would never hear English. None of those are ever part of the conversation that those should be imprisoned, that we should send them to jails in El Salvador. But why are they not part of the conversation? Because there is a supply and a demand. And we address, I think, in this country, when it comes to the drug war, we try to go after the supply and those buying as well, and there's equal opportunity for punishment for both. But that's never happened in the United States, again, which is unfortunate and part of this hypocrisy, but also speaks to the red herring that it's just a political cudgel for many. If anyone has questions, we have a small crowd. Feel free to interrupt me too. So then you might ask, well, we did see a lot of stuff during the Biden period. What happened? There were tons of people coming across the border, and we saw the images and what was going on there. And so there was a dramatic increase, and I think part of that was the change in administrations. We had a really draconian policy. Biden tried to lighten that up. But then the question is, well, where did the people come from? And so you had an increase from 12.2 million in, again, 2010. It goes down, a decent amount during that first Trump term, but it actually hits. Okay. Well, I'm going to keep going, and maybe Henry will troubleshoot. And so, yeah, we'll try to plug that direct.
But I just enjoy your friendship and your support. You're very supportive to me.
Was that part of your presentation? That looked like a great show.
lift you would expect then would show immediately a marked increase in unemployment. It would also suppress wages, because how are you going to introduce that many adult workers into a community and not have that? So it was like this great little test in a confined area to find out, all right, well, our gut instinct that Mark Twain would say, you can't put all these people in a community and it's not going to have that impact of both of those things. And this very exhaustive study by a team from the University of California at Berkeley shows, and it's cited frequently, that the actual impact was an expansion of the economy, that actually employment grew, and there was no discernible impact on wages. And the biggest reason was you brought in 120,000 new consumers into that community as well that were demanding all of these types of goods too. And so they've replicated studies similar to that since then that have found similar conclusions as well. The third myth, that immigrants don't pay taxes. This one's interesting. Any of us right now could think of a Social Security number that we want to invent. We could also be an undocumented immigrant and request a tax ID number, which will allow you to then go work for an employer like these poultry producers or these contractors that build our condos here. You will then, as an employee, pay all of your income tax, your Social Security tax. You will never have a right to draw on that Social Security tax. There is a file with our Social Security Administration that's called the Earning Suspense Fund. That fund is now up to $1.2 trillion, or $1.2 trillion that will never go to the individuals that paid into that. So in 2022 alone, $25.7 billion went into that trust fund just from undocumented immigrants. It's something that you'll never really hear about. It's estimated by the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities that in 2022, 96 to 100 billion in federal, state, and local taxes were paid by our undocumented population. So that myth that immigrants don't pay taxes is a significant myth. And then Henry's telling me I need to fly through this a little bit more. There's this myth about immigrants just being low-wage earners that really are not creating jobs and doing that. The one that we always like to use because we work in Manatee County is Tropicana. Tropicana was started by an Italian immigrant who came here with $30 in his pocket and a 6th grade education. When Tropicana was sold to the Pepsi company, I think it was sold for $2 billion and had over 3,000 employees all around the world. There are many other examples: eBay, Intel, Google, Yahoo, all founded by first-gen immigrants. I think the bulk, over 52% of Silicon Valley startups are from foreign-born workers. And there is a significant, I think Reagan alluded to that. If you are someone who is leaving your country, you don't speak the language, you're traveling thousands of miles to come to this country, you're already a risk taker, you have that entrepreneurial spirit. That entrepreneurial spirit, that first-generation immigrant, has been critically important for this economy of this country for basically the past 150, 200 years. Forcing the fifth myth, forcing 14 million out of this country will help the economy rebound quicker. I think we have a ton of examples that we can talk of welfare to work programs where they've tried to remove immigrant populations and then bring in prisoners or others to help with agriculture that have been dramatic failures, and we can talk about that offline as well. I think the last thing that I'll just talk about is this baby boomer tsunami that we're having, that in the next, pretty much if you look out over the past 50 years, our population of 65 plus has hovered around 20%. Over the next 20 years, that's going to jump up to above 35, 40%. And what that means is that is a population that is dependent on these entitlements that we've promised everyone. And for them to have that, you have to have a working population that's paying into that program. And so there's this generational compact that all of us have, is when our children are here, we're going to pay for their education. But when you're a working adult, you pay into the system. And then when you retire, you're going to receive the benefits of that system. We are having the exact opposite demographic conversation then that we should have. We need, we have an educated adult workforce here of these immigrants that are here, and what we're trying to do then is deport, whatever the number will be. Where is this going to be enough? 5 million, 14 million? I don't know. And Christy Noem was in Bradenton 2 days ago and said they're going as hard as they can after this because they want millions to self-deport, and that's happening now. It remains to be seen what those numbers are. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at Europe and what they're trying to do to bring in new population, that's the same conversation ultimately, frankly, this country should be having, which is unfortunate. And then the final thing that I'll say, and I think it'll tee up CJ because I know he's going to talk about it, but FDR gave an address on July 4th, 1936 at Monticello, the home of Thomas Jefferson. And so it's done on July 4th, the Declaration of Independence, where we say all men are created equal. And his quote on that July 4th was, "Theirs were not the gods of things as they were, but the gods of things as they ought to be." And so I think we have this invocation a lot of, again, Christianity and these types of things, but then we have this cognitive dissonance of these same people that are doing it are then celebrating shackling 6-year-olds and separating them from their parents. It's some of the most traumatic, inhumane things that you can think of. And I'm not sure how we grapple with that and how that's even possible, but I say in a house of worship like this in the Unitarian Church, I bring it up because I do think there is a space for all of us to call each other as brothers and sisters in this country. That indeed, if that's what that you are advancing these policies, then let's dive deeper into that. And what would a more humane policy look like, which I think then our next two speakers are going to go into that and speak. So, Henry, thanks very much for giving me this opportunity. Sorry I went on too long.
So I'm thinking that maybe we can work a way that the PowerPoint can be available through our website. So if you go to the website, you inquire for our newsletter or news emails, etc., we'll try and have that available for you. Maybe we can share it on a Google platform or something like that. Our next speaker is Miluska Zavala More. She is a skilled attorney with DeBrule and Noah. I didn't say that right, but she'll correct me later. Full-service immigration law firm specializing in family reunification, removal defense, and guiding clients through the immigration process from start to finish. She is multi-talented in many other ways, and financial background also, and I would like to just bring her up quickly and thank her again for taking time away from the immigration conference to be here tonight. And Miluska Zavala More.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you can all hear me okay. I do not have a fancy PowerPoint presentation, so I'm going to try to do my best in telling you from my point of view, not only as an immigrant. I came here 20 years ago, and something that Kelly was saying about our spirit for make this country better. I knew that I was coming here to become an asset to my community. Right now, I'm an immigration attorney, but I'm also a litigator immigration attorney. So I get to witness firsthand everything that you think you see on social media, anything horror stories about somebody's being detained, somebody's being deported. I get to see this every day in court, at the ICE offices, when my clients call me desperately crying because a good person is being detained and deported without due process. And let me tell you what I see and what you might know doesn't even come to compare. It's way worse. And I want to think that's why we're here, because we see the need of an immigration reform. We see the need to become uncomfortable and talk about immigration from a completely different perspective. And I want to point out the fact that Henry said, I am in the middle of a conference now. It's the yearly annual National Immigration Lawyers Association conference. It's a 5-day conference, and it brings to my mind the fact that for the first time in 39 years, we have 250 attorneys here at the Hyatt in Clearwater spending a whole day talking about this new concocted term, crimmigration. Crimmigration, we're going to spend a whole day talking about immigration law and how it entwines with criminal law. Why? Because I studied to become an immigration attorney, to still believe in the promise of the United States that if you have a family abroad overseas, you can bring them because the United States believes in family unification. That if you're a skilled worker, you can have a work visa. That if you're escaping torture in your home country, the U.S. is going to welcome you. I studied for that. And now, how difficult it is for us to see that everything that we talk about is now considered criminal. How come society nowadays think that a refugee, somebody escaping domestic violence, an individual escaping a war zone, a child escaping gangs in their country, now they're all considered criminals under this administration. And it brings to my mind the fact that not only we need to address this from a, let's say, spiritual point of view, societal point of view, but as an attorney, I need to think what is going to be the real change. And that is when legislation comes to place. I think you all have a flyer about the Dignity Act. The Dignity Act is an initiative that was passed in July of 2025, and that is really kind of like a light of hope for everybody that thinks why we need an immigration reform. It talks about 3 main areas that we need to consider if we want to see real change. First, we do know that we need to secure our borders. We need to be more careful about who we're letting inside of the United States. But we need a system that is doing it in a way that we still know that people that are coming here, they have rights. The second part is the asylum process. And I want to use an example that I saw myself. The United States promises that if you come running from your country because you completely and utterly are terrified for your life, you will be granted asylum. I was defending an asylum case, a very strong case. I did a 4-hour of my arguments, rebuttal, fighting for a family. The judge came after 10 minutes of deliberation and denied my asylum. And he gave me a specific, very clear answer. He had it pre-written. So the asylum system truly needs a reform. The third part of the Dignity Act, it's exactly what the name stands for. People that are already living in the U.S. over 7 years, and they have the ability to demonstrate that they're an asset for their community, they need a path to citizenship. They need some kind of solution because the system is broken. Recently, this bill has been endorsed by many large associations. The latter one was the National Hispanic Christian Conference, one of the largest Hispanic evangelical organizations of this country. They had just officially endorsed it. That means 42,000 of affiliated churches and millions of followers. Another organizations that have endorsed this bill are the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the American Business Immigration Coalition, the National Association of Home Builders, and several other labor groups. If I look at the nature of who is supporting this bill, I see two parts: religious organizations and businesses. Why? from the religious points, regardless of what kind of religious or non-religious thing you believed in. You cannot turn your back on your neighbor. You cannot see all these terrifying things happening to another human being and think it's correct because that human being doesn't have a green card. The second part of supporters are businesses, because we cannot be blind to the fact that it's not being biased and it's not profiling, but the economy rely on immigrants. Let's face it, who's gonna work the fields? Who's gonna do the lawn? Who's going to clean houses? It's not wrong for us to accept that we rely economically on the immigrant force. I am going back to the conference after this, and I have been thinking in the reason why community like you come together and they want to learn more about this topic. I want to go back to the conference and learn more about how to become a better attorney. But I also want every attorney there to learn that we're not only there to build hours for our clients, but right now it's a historical moment for real change. They need to know that we sign up for this profession to become an advocate for change and be the defenders of the ones that cannot defend themselves. I really want to finish saying that I do appreciate your attention, and I am just telling you from my point of view why this reform is needed, but I also need to tell you that we need to do what's in our power to create a change. And if we are not going to support the Dignity Act, we need to support the dignity of our neighbor. Thank you.
Just as I was listening to Miluska, and she talked about all those other organizations and the faith-based organizations, it just occurred to me that you as individuals are probably thinking, well, you got to get together, you got to bring coalitions together. Yes, you do. But, you know, if this church endorsed the Dignity Act, that could lead to a press release. That could lead to a posting on social media. That could lead to a hashtag Dignity Act and a hashtag whatever you like to use for UUSAP, a hashtag UUSAP. And then if all your members then circulated on their media, the algorithms pick that up. We have, maybe generously 24 people here. We've had other events. We certainly have not had more than 100 at any of these events, but the last event that I took the shorts from, like a dynamic speak like Miluska, or an educational speak like Kelly there, or what you're going to hear from CJ, just 5 shorts got 6,000 views. We filled an arena with those shorts. You can go to our YouTube channel and you can share those too, and again, the snowball rolls, and you'll be surprised what a small, consistent action can do to make change. So I'll get off. Well, I'm not one of the speakers here, so I better move on. One other thing, I gotta say this. There's a favorite line of a Billy Joel song, because I'm in my right cultural reference group here, from The Angry Young Man, and about sometimes just surviving is a noble fight. But if that's a noble fight, what is it when you fight for the survival and the welfare of so many people like Miluska does every day? Noble times X squared. I'm combining lots of different word references here. But that's okay, because we're going to have someone that has a lot to say coming up. As Miluska is the immigration attorney. You have Kelly here from Unidos Now as the board chair, and research those in all they do. They're coming here just out of their goodwill to do this. So if you have someone that has an immigration question, you know someone in the practice that you can reach out to that office. Or if you have a young person with a Latin background, a Hispanic background, that maybe needs to connect with someone to help them live their dreams, you can go to Unidos Now. And our next speaker, he started out as a public defender. I don't need to look at the notes. I've known him 25 years. He started out as a public defender. Then he got into the fight as a personal injury attorney. And I have personally known of a case where the insurance adjuster said, I'm turning off this recording, and it was my daughter she told it to. This guy's a bulldog. And he brings that to all his passion, whether it's motorcycle racing, whether it's criminal defense. He still does criminal defense. Well, crime doesn't pay. I don't know why he does that. And he's out there fighting for individuals that are wronged, and now he's here fighting to improve the situation for immigrants and the Hispanic community and the other ethnic communities that are suffering right now. So I could go back, I could read all this. I already said it to you. He's anxious to get it. Do you have this thing on? No. Yes. Oh, here it is, right here. It's here for you. All right, CJ Czaia, and the founder of Unidos Now.
You have the mic, is it up there? All right. Good evening. All right, I guess I have to put this on. Wow, it's difficult to follow these two folks, particularly Kelly is so knowledgeable with facts and figures, and I've known Kelly, like I said, we founded Unidos Now. It was our passion and belief to do what's right and just. But I'm going to start out with my normal beginning about the tomatoes and cucumbers and oranges and bell peppers and strawberries and apples and grapes and peaches and pears and cherries, tomatoes, asparagus, on and on, planted and picked mostly by undocumented labor, farm workers. Slaves in the fields, they are some of the poorest workers in the United States. Low pay, few breaks, poor sanitation, exposure to pesticides and chemicals, lack of health care, and denied the right to organize. Waiters, busboys, cooks, construction workers, pool cleaners, maids, janitors, professionals like doctors, nurses, lawyers, actors, even a Pulitzer Prize winner, professionals who interact with us every day are undocumented. The dreamers, the youngsters that are friends with our children, that attend our schools, are undocumented. Maybe the young men and women who protect, defend, and die in the service of this nation are or were undocumented or have families, including spouses that are undocumented. I want you to remember one name when you leave tonight. Lance Corporal Jose Gutierrez, an orphan from Guatemala, traveled 3,000 miles on foot, jumped freight trains, hitchhiked to come to this country, crossed the border, as Trump would say, illegally, lived in 4 foster homes, found love and peace he desired. He graduated from high school. In 2002, he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. He felt it was his duty to defend this nation and her people. The people who had given him hope and opportunity. He said, I want you to never forget Jose Gutierrez. He crossed our border, who came to our country without papers, undocumented. He was one of the first United States servicemen to give up his life in defense of this nation, his adopted nation, the country he loved, the United States of America. We owe him and so many others more than just our gratitude. The next time a friend or neighbor or anyone demeans the undocumented person, remind them of the sacrifices that undocumented people do for us and give us every day that we're here in this great country. Now, how can we call someone illegal? It's not a crime to be here without papers. It's just not a crime. I'm a criminal defense guy for years. I've won murder trials. I know what a crime is, and what do you happen when there's a crime? What do we get as a fundamental right here? A right to an attorney. Does an immigrant get a right to an attorney? No. Why? It's not a crime. They're not illegal. We just label them illegal. Now, there are some crimes associated with crossing the border, and I can get into that. But simply, it's not a crime. You don't have the right to due process. You don't have a right to an attorney. You don't have a right to a Title III judge. The judges that she sees every day in court really work for the executive branch. They're not real judges. I don't consider them judges. Like, that's a Social Security judge. You're an administrative hearing officer. That's all you are. They want to be treated as judges. They think they're all full of it. That's why they do that. But they're not real judges. They're not Title III judges. They work directly for the president. And guess what they have to do? Whatever he wants. They need to rule the way he wants. First thing Trump did was, when he got elected, was remove all the immigration judges that were appointed by Biden. First thing. Why? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand why. But thousands and thousands of undocumented people have been detained. Now, that's a fancy word for arrested. Because they go to the same darn jails, they're zip-tied or locked together, they're torn apart from their families in this very country. No due process, and if you don't have a problem with that, you're an evil, bad human being. You just are, and I'll tell it to your face. I mean, that's what made our country so great. Due process. Don't they want less government, more rights? We get a Roe v. Wade, and now we don't have a right of privacy anymore. The government can legislate what you do with your body. It wasn't about abortion. It was about privacy. Now government has a right to get in, and with this, there's no rights for the immigrant. They've been beaten and locked up, terrorized by ICE. It is inhumane. It's un-American. A rapist and a murderer has more rights than an immigrant. A rapist. A murderer has more rights than an immigrant in this nation. And I can explain why, not based on what I want to believe. If you want to make it against the law, make it against the law. But it's not. Now, it's a civil issue. I walk around, and I think you've seen this. I've been carrying this for years. It was from Sojourns, a magazine, a Christian magazine, Citizen or Criminal, little child. And this was back during the debate of the Dreamers. Remember the DREAM Act? Oh, they're dreamers. What do you have to qualify? Deferred action for childhood arrivals. You had to be here before the age of 16. You had continued to live in the United States since June 15th of 07. That you're not over 31 by June 15th of 2012. You had to be law-abiding, graduate from high school. Okay, that's for a small portion of the young people. There are a lot of people that came before and after children, like this child, that are considered illegal, and to many alleged good people in this nation, criminals. So, I used to make this argument all the time. There's a pen here. I take it, I use the pen, right? I put it here, and I walk out. Have I stolen the pen? No, not if I had the intent. I have to have the intent to deprive the church, the people, the person's pen, to be convicted of a crime of theft. The intent, right? You have to have the intent. It's part of many crimes. So I ask you, if you're a child of this age, what crime have you committed? What intent did you have to come here? How do you call them a criminal? How do you deport little children and call them criminals when they were brought here by somebody? So if you just can't understand the concept that it's not a crime because it's not in the statute books, you ought to understand that a child can't commit a crime. Not like that. They were brought here. So there are some children that are protected. Now they're getting older. But that was during Barack Obama's term that they came up with DACA. There are millions before and after that are not protected. They weren't brought here by their own choice. So let's talk about asylum real quick. Political asylum exists, it's been touched on by both speakers before me, and it doesn't matter how you get to this country. It doesn't matter how you enter. You were checked in, you had a visa, you're it doesn't matter, because you're running away from really some persecution or something in your country. Under the current laws, you come to the United States. Remember under Biden, they were lining up at the border? And I'm thinking, are they sneaking in? They're checking in. They're Venezuelans primarily, and they're checking in, and they're saying political asylum. They're following the law, political asylum. And then you're supposed to get a driver's license, the right to work, and you go to a hearing, a trial, if you will. And then you have to prove your case. I have personal friends who have been waiting 13 years for the political asylum hearing. 13 years. They've had children. Is the system broken? Yes, they should have had their hearing immediately. Now, what's happening today, they're going with the most recent arrivals, which I think makes sense, and they have their day in court. But look, I've represented thousands of people. I've won murder trials. I've done every kind of work. In personal injury cases, never would I ever have a trial by judge. Why do you think our forefathers gave us a right to a jury trial? Because they don't trust judges. And since I've already told you that immigration judges aren't real judges, they have to goose step based on what the president said. All right? Who trusts a judge? I have a place in Colombia. They don't have jury trials. You think you get justice there? Hell no. Why do you think people love this? We have a system that if you're accused of a crime, you have a group of peers of yours that are going to judge you, are going to determine if the state has proven you guilty beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. In immigration, you don't. You don't. I don't trust it. You can have the greatest case. Person wants to keep his job that calls himself a judge, you're gone. Remember that. I think Kelly mentioned the deported chief was Barack Obama. He deported more people than anybody else, even to Trump 1. Okay? Trump first presidency, Barack deported more people. I think Trump deported 326,000 per year. Obama was deporting 436,000 per year. Even Biden deported more people than Trump did in his first term. You know, we can go on and on about facts, but I can tell you that there are estimates of 11 to 25 million people who are undocumented in the United States, depending who you want to believe. I think it's impossible. I think it's a ruse. They know. Matter of fact, I'm going to tell you a little secret or a story. When Kelly was talking about back then, I had a meeting with the president of the Senate of Florida, and we had taken some growers from Plant City to meet the Senate president, because they were talking about E-Verify, of making sure that everybody that was going to be hired had to verify that they had a Social Security that was valid. The governor recently, our great leader, did that a couple years ago, a year ago, so when he said, now if you have over, is it 20 people or 25? 25 people, you don't have to check on them. But if you have a business over 25, you have to do the E-Verify and make sure. Now, why wouldn't he say all people? Because he knows that if they get rid of undocumented labor, the entire agriculture system collapses. They know that there won't be any builders, there won't be anybody to do the labor, that the economy would suffer greatly. So what do? Instead of having 50 employees, the subcontractor has 25. And they don't get checked. The hypocrisy is huge. Kelly had also mentioned about they're going to detain these people and destroy families, but who hires them? You don't think they don't know? Well, how they get around that? They got a subcontractor. They're corrupt. And they get a free pass, but they're white. Hate to say it, they're part of the system. So I met with the Senate president, gave lots of money, a lot of love, and it was clear that the bill goes through and it fizzled. This is a game, and they're playing with human life. Okay? What depresses me is the people who call themselves Christians that think it's okay to treat children as criminals, and people who are just, need some help, or who want to work, who love this country. I think even Reagan was saying that if you become a naturalized citizen, you really love this country. Damn it, these people left their family, their culture, their friends, their loved ones. Many can't go back and see their parents who are dying or their friends. I personally am going through this myself with my wife. It's hell to do it correctly. It's hell to do it without doing it correctly. You don't see your family. You can't travel outside the country. Your family member could be dying. It's too bad. They're also delaying right now any kind of legal process. It's taking forever. And they're changing the rules as they go along. He doesn't care about immigration, period. They don't care in the White House. Anyway, I think the world is waking up, people are waking up, and the numbers are showing that they're not in favor of this. We want immigration reform. We don't want open border. Nobody. It's sort of like a lot of Latinos voted for Trump instead of Biden because they were getting the word that he was a pedophile. This is a true story. Through the WhatsApp thing. Who is the pedophile? Who is friends with the pedophile? Think about this. I mean, I've been just watching the Jeffrey Epstein stuff today and what they're trying to do. The hypocrisy is thick. Two other things. When a politician says they're against people who are woke, I've done a little looking into this. You know, what does woke mean? It means to be informed, to be educated, to be conscious of social justice and racial inequality. They don't want you to be a critical thinker. You don't have to agree with anything I say. Go look it up for yourself. Be a critical thinker. They're destroying education. They want you to work and goose step in line based on the dear leader. They don't want you to be awoke. They don't want you to be awake. They don't want you to be educated. When you hear them say that, know what they are doing. They're trying to sanitize our history so they control us for power, for the wealthy. We need leaders that bring us together, that solve the problems. We need a common memory. Because what happens, the white majority remembers the mythological history of discovery, expansion, exceptionalism, and opportunity. But people of color who have lived the experience of stolen land, broken treaties, slavery, Jim Crow, boarding schools, ethnic genocide, Indian removal, internment camps. My mom was good friends with a Japanese American U.S. citizen that was locked up during World War II. Segregation, mass incarceration, how about slavery? Families separated at the borders, etc. We need a common memory. It's sort of like an alcoholic. You can't remove your alcoholism or resolve your problem until you admit you're an alcoholic. It's okay to say, yeah, we were like racist in the past. Even in our sacred documents of our country, a Native American is not a human being. A black man is 3/5 human. It's written there. Women, it's 55 times in the Constitution, his, him, never her. You think women had rights? No. It was wealthy white men. That's why our system's working for wealthy white people. Ask Virginia Giuffre, if she were alive. Look, I try to understand why do we have this problem. I just want to touch on this real quick about vertical morality and horizontal morality. I don't know if you've heard of this. I'm just trying to understand why people of faith can be so evil and terrible to other people. Vertical morality is about authority and power and moral code of right versus wrong from above. God is absolute, and he comes down and he tells you what to do and you've got to follow it. And the superior in religion is God. In politics, it's an authoritarian leader, a dear leader, a controlling leader, like a dictator. In horizontal morality, prioritizes the well-being of our neighbors and communities and personal relationships, regardless of belief. So it's a focus on empathy and compassion and love towards others. You know, so that's like if you ask me, it's Jesus horizontally, the teachings, and the Old Testament vertically, right? So what happens? When there's times of trouble and problems, people feel more comfortable with the vertical version of morality. There's a God, and those people are going to want a dear leader. They're going to want a dictator. They're going to want to be told what to do. And of course, this is so easy to weaponize. It's so easy to weaponize this concept. That's what the Trump administration and people understand. Christian nationalism, you know, if you're on my side, you're on MAGA, you're good, and if you're Democrat, you're going to hell, you're Satan. And if you're gay, oh my God. It's not what Jesus taught, right? The horizontal concept, compassion and love to everyone. We need to understand how we get played. And I really believe that we need leadership. And don't forget, 1970, just down the road in Manatee County, Republican Governor Clark Kirk took over the school board building to prevent the integration of schools. We were around during that time. 1970. Jim Crow here, I had a Jewish friend, and she was driving from Miami Beach up, and she said I couldn't get her a hotel room, and I said, why? And she goes, because all the signs said no Jews or dogs are allowed. A Colombian man in 1968 in Miami Beach went into the whites-only bathroom and got kicked out, went to the black bathroom and got kicked out. He was like brown. I guess there was no bathroom for him. That's right here in Florida. That's right here in Florida in our lifetime. I can tell you a story of me walking down St. Pete 1978. I had a black young lady friend. I felt I've never been stared in ways that, it was horrendous. We couldn't even hang out. This black young friend of mine, girl. Right here. I was 19 years old. Is it changed? A lot, but it really hasn't. Listen, we want immigration reform. We want to make the system better. And it's important that we support legislation and politicians and people elected officials who want immigration reform. Unfortunately, Congress's approval rating is 18 to 22%. 94% of them are reelected. I think that's because 90% of our districts are gerrymandered. Even AOC gets elected because she takes out a moderate Democrat. In Sarasota, Vern Buchanan is not worried about the challenge from the left. He's worried about a challenge from the right. So what we get, when you get elected, you have left and right. You don't have competitive districts anymore. In my opinion, gerrymandered has destroyed this. And we need to keep working to make a fairer, better system. And we need to demand justice. Now, you all are here tonight. You obviously care. But it's upon us, and I think Henry was mentioning it, if we reach out to our group, if we go on TikTok, if you go and say something, if you pass some information along, and for me, the biggest underlying thing, because I keep hearing, we're a nation of laws. Yeah, that's why the president was convicted 34 counts. He's a felon. We're a nation of laws. As a matter of fact, he's a draft dodger, but it used to matter in my day, but I guess it's not anymore. Been bankrupt 6 times. My dad taught me that your name is everything. And anyway, see how everything's changed? But we need to educate people, if nothing else, that being undocumented is not a crime. It's not a crime. It's not a crime, and how dare you treat them as criminals? What kind of system we have that gives more preference to a murderer, a pedophile, a rapist? Let me tell you, I did some immigration. I don't like doing it. I don't do it. I would go home crying every night. Every night. We see the worst. I wanted my daughter to be a lawyer, and then she doesn't want to. She likes the arts. And smart her. We're here tonight because we see this every day. We live it. every day. The injustice, the inhumanity, the evilness of our neighbors, the ignorance, or maybe plain stupidity. Maybe you can't fix stupid. I don't know. But it's important that we do march at the No King's Day. It's important that we stand up to our neighbors and speak the truth. It is important that we get back to the basic roots. Reverend Charles McKenzie, I know some of you might know him, he used to always say that he was very optimistic about the American people. I'm glad he is. I think if you work doing what we do as attorneys in this field, you may not feel that way. But we have hope. 7 million reasons a couple days ago for hope. And they keep saying, oh, they're all older people. And I said, well, thank God somebody is listening. Somebody is seeing the injustice. And the frightening thing is that because young people were not taught to critically think. I remember having to remember my friend's phone number. I can't do that today. I remember being able to drive from here to anywhere and not have to rely on a GPS because there was no GPS, and I somehow made it happen. I remember that I could write properly. Even today I can't because I'm so reliant on that computer. And now we're getting AI. Oh my word. Sometimes I'm happy I'm 66. AI is coming, ladies and gentlemen, and thinks for us. It tells us what to believe. And with algorithms, I put something in, all of a sudden I get a flood of the like-minded things. We are in trouble, and we're only going to overcome that if we get involved. Ian Kirschner, a famous Jewish philosopher, historian, you know, he used to always say, talk about that.Com, and what he would say is,
We're out of time.
we're out of time. That's what he would say. That was my last word. The road to Auschwitz was built by hate, but paid with indifference. So I'll always say it's up to us to make that difference. So thank you for your time tonight, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all for coming. Thank you all watching online. Thanks to Kelly, Miluska, CJ, and WMNF. Be sure and support your community radio station. And onward and empoweredfl.org is where you can find the website. Send us your info. We'll send you news and events coming out of that. We have a YouTube channel. We're on X, formerly Twitter. Find us there. There's links on our website. And we hope to have video from here that you can share with your friends within, let's say, a day and a half, 2 days. All right? Thank you all again. Thank you. And CJ is here. I'm sure I'd like to say hi if you have a question, something like that.